This focus on deterrence arises because we are once again contending with major powers such as the United States, Russia, and China. The concept of deterrence consists of two primary components. The first is what we call denial deterrence. Well, basically, it is to make life difficult for the opponent, making it super complicated for him to achieve his goals. Even if the initial attack happens, the idea is to limit the damage and prevent the conflict from escalating. You want an example? Earlier this year, Iran launched an attack on Israel. And what happened? Israel, with the help of the United States and those advanced air defense systems, was able to intercept most of the Iranian missiles and drones. The result? Space to plan a calmer and more calculated response, but of course, at a price, right? Responding to relatively inexpensive attacks from ICUs in the Red Sea, for example, the United States Navy spent enormous resources on munitions and deterrence operations, failing to completely neutralize the threat. And that begs the question, to what extent are these efforts sustainable? Well, my friends, but now let's talk about such deterrence by punishment, which is that idea of sending the message to the opponent. You screw up, the consequences will be severe, huh? This was very evident in the Ukraine war, when Putin began to give those indirect hints about using nuclear weapons. What did the United States do? They answered quickly. In the can, right? If you do, the consequences will be catastrophic. But it wasn't just in the conversation, because countries like China and India also helped to put pressure, since people who, when we talk about nuclear weapons, self-subsistence, end up belonging to everyone. And this ended up greatly reducing the risk of a nuclear escalation. Remember those famous red lines we talked about? In situations of tension, such as the one we are experiencing, it is necessary to be very careful with each attitude. For example, did you know that the United States even postponed ballistic and intercontinental missile tests to prevent anyone from misinterpreting this? Yes, it was a way to avoid misunderstanding. And when things got tight, like after the October 2023 attacks by Hamas, they sent aircraft carriers directly to the Middle East and gave a clear message to Iran, don't make things worse. Do you see how these decisions have to be quick and accurate? When we look at Iran's attitudes, we can also see the caution of the attitudes and the intensity of the responses. Guys, not everything is so straightforward when it comes to deterrence. Have you ever thought that relying too much on these displays of force can backfire? On the one hand, opponents learn quickly, don't they? They can start planning ways to circumvent these threats, which ends up roasting those threats less effective. On the other hand, this also weighs on military readiness. Imagine us spending resources, too many on one effort, and then, when we need to meet another demand, we are left with our hands tied to respond in other regions. As an example, we can remember the Russian action in the recent uprising in Syria. Incidentally, the peaceful anthem is where a new approach called deterrence through resilience comes in. Analyzing, for example, the actions of the United States and its allies, the idea is not only to prevent an initial attack, but to ensure that, even in the event of an attack, United States forces can continue fighting. At the same time, China maintains pressure so that there is no progress on the other side, and the realization of its One China policy is ready to be consolidated as soon as the scenario is favorable. And it is clear that China is noticing the movement of its main adversary. The use of deterrence by resilience by the United States is being followed by the Chinese closely, and I think all of you have already noticed that Washington is doing this. They are diversifying their military bases, entering new territories such as the Philippines, and strengthening partnerships with allies such as Australia and Japan in Washington's view, bringing stability in Beijing's view, increasing instability. U.S. diplomacy is, shall we say, very aggressive. For example, agreements such as with Papua New Guinea are allowing Washington to modernize local bases, conduct more joint exercises, and of course, work better in partnership with other militaries. And let me tell you, an American nuclear-capable submarine paid a visit to South Korea the other day. Can you imagine the impact of that? It's like he's saying, look, we're here and we're not going anywhere. On the other hand, North Korea realizes that it needs to strengthen itself and prepare for a potential confrontation. Therefore, it is no coincidence that North Korea is increasingly getting closer to Russia, seeking to expand its technological capabilities. There is also strategic uncertainty. It is, and here I would use the metaphor of Xi Jinping's frozen smiling look. Have you ever caught yourself trying to imagine what he might be thinking? So guys, it's not always possible to know how each ally will react if things really heat up. Will they release the use of the bases, or will they get directly involved in the conflict? This doubt is part of the game, you see. You think with me, if a state X does not have total clarity, the opponents, like the state Y, are also left without knowing what to expect. And this, of course, ends up complicating any offensive planning. Now you can see that this is not just about military bases and movements, it is also about diplomacy. Did you know that the United States recently achieved a historic milestone? Oh, bringing Japan and South Korea closer is the rivalry between the two. Guys, it's very old, it predates the 16th century, and today there are more than 60 meetings and joint exercises in recent years alone. This shows that the construction of these regional networks is in full swing, and of course we have talked a lot about this on the channel. Now they have created AUKUS, the alliance that brings together Australia, the United Kingdom and the United States to modernize military capabilities, such as nuclear submarines. Can you imagine what it takes to coordinate all this? And look, the challenge is big, huh? Other actors in the region, such as China, see these alliances quite differently. In their view, this presence of the United States and its allies ends up generating more instability in the region. Now, keeping everyone aligned is not easy at all. It requires a constant diplomatic and strategic effort. In the end, while some think that these collaborations reinforce stability, for others, they are seen as a factor of tension that generates the need to arm themselves and seek more and more possible and available alliances. Now, folks, how do we prevent these conflicts from escalating into an all-out war? The answer lies in a very important concept, acting before the whole thing explodes. That means strengthening the alliance, investing in technology, but above all, having a very broad vision. Today's conflicts, such as in Ukraine and the Middle East, show how complex modern scenarios are. They are no longer limited to military battles. They are phenomena that involve entire societies, economies, and even the global political climate. Therefore, strategies need to go beyond simply acquiring the most advanced weapons. They should include new and old systems working together, because each piece has its function. And folks, speaking of Taiwan, we have here an example of one of the most delicate tensions in the current global scenario. There he is at the center of intense debates, while the United States seeks to improve the speed in the delivery of military aid and ensure sustainable defense in the long term. We cannot forget on the other side of this story, the Chinese policy of one Chin polit for the Chinese folks. This is sacred, and China's own international relations with other countries are related to this policy. In the 1970s, the United States, a member of the United Nations, and then Brazil also stopped recognizing Taiwan as China and recognized Beijing, so much so that the fifth seat on the Security Council and the United Nations passed to mainland China on that occasion. Previously, Taiwan represented China. This vision promoted by Beijing considers Taiwan part of its territory, and even in the context of the New Silk Road, this policy is a kind of golden text. This whole dynamic adds another layer of complexity, especially as the United States is focused on training Taiwanese forces and preparing the island for real conflict scenarios. But as you know, there's no point just having cutting-edge technology if the soldiers aren't ready. The impact may be limited. And look, speaking of alliances, the relationship between the United States and India also deserves special attention. For years, this partnership was kind of lukewarm, huh? I didn't have all that enthusiasm, but look how things change. The need to counter China has made the United States seek to get closer to New Delhi, even failing to implicate its nuclear program. Does India know this and has taken advantage of it to guarantee a kind of pragmatic equidistance? Participation in groups like BRICS balance this rapprochement with the United States? And of course, New Delhi will not downplay this wink from Washington, but will probably make it clear that it is not for marriage. It's an open relationship. In the end, the global security scenario is the most. At the end of the day, folks, this global security scenario is the most complicated since the end of the Cold War, which we can learn from today's wars. Preparedness and prevention are the keys to avoiding something even bigger and more devastating in the future. May peace once again be the predominant scenario in our world. We're done here. If this video is useful to you, make the comment, share your social networks, give a like, and of course, if not already subscribed, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so as not to miss the next videos. Okay guys, a big hug to Professor Aaron Alves.